I so wanted to not have to make this video. Hi everyone, Kryles here, and you may remember a few years ago I made a video defending Korra and a little follow-up to that because I grew up on and absolutely loved Avatar: The Last Airbender. And there's even a point in that video I say, here's to hoping that the Netflix live-action series takes the maturity level up to really let the show grow in its strong and powerful themes, and let it be nothing like the movie we don't talk about because it doesn't actually exist in my head. Man, was I wholly disappointed by Netflix. So to preface, let's get some things clear about Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender and my opinions on it before we begin. Is it worse than M. Night Shyamalan's 2010 movie? No. For all technical intents and purposes, it is by no means worse than that slop. However, I will say that even though the Netflix show is not slop like the 2010 movie, I would go as far to say it is at least still slime, and not the stress reliever kind, more like the 2010 Katy Perry's Kids' Choice Award kind. Continued with that, I can't say either that I wholeheartedly disagree with the memes circling through Twitter about how at least the 2010 movie is only 2 hours of terrible. In reference to these different versions of the show, let's just call the original, or OG, M. Night's for the 2010 movie, and Netflix's Avatar for the live-action show. Okay? Okay, great. With that preface over, let's continue. So this show is just an absolute mess all across the board, and I'm gonna get into why and kind of section them out and explain. We have production problems, runtime issues, lore/story issues, fan servicing, acting/direction problems, complete character misinterpretations, music and orchestration problems, and tonal problems. Hitting some of these points to kind of mesh all together my feelings after watching all 8 episodes of the slime that is Netflix's Avatar. So, first things first, something I'm sure most of us have heard and know is that during pre-production, the creators of the original 2005 cartoon for Nickelodeon, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, left the project due to creative differences. A sign I wish we all, including myself, would have taken more for the omen that it was for this adaptation's downfall. In a day and age where there are many shows that are being adapted and then disregarding the literal source material because cash-grabbing showrunners, producers, funders know better, we should have seen this coming from a mile away. You see shows like The Witcher, Rings of Power, and Halo are just examples of this idea that money-busting Hollywood shows made off of a very good IP that get muddled and destroyed because of the mentality of, we know what the fans want and know better than the original, which all ultimately crash and burn. The news of the original creators leaving for those creative differences, and then recent news of changes to the story for the live action, like removing Sokka's sexism and not allowing Aang to be a kid as to not waste time, were just some of the warning signs that this slime was coming for all of us. And none of this had to be the case, for there are adaptations that are made by avid fans who care so much for the source material and are literally given the seal of approval from the creators, like Oda with Netflix's One Piece live-action show. A great example of a show that not only speeds up some story beats so as to not waste time, but even makes other story changes that still end up really good. So let's get into that idea too, the idea of wasting time, since that was something that Albert Kim, the live-action showrunner, didn't want to do. So Netflix's Avatar is an adaptation of Book 1, Water, the 20-episode first season of the original cartoon. For the original, each episode was about 23 minutes in length, and for the Netflix show, each of the 8 episodes is anywhere from 47 to 62 minutes. The full runtime for the original cartoon was 477 minutes, and for the Netflix show, it is a total of 430 minutes. So in reality, they could have, and really should have, just perfectly cut and pasted the original show with some minor cuts and adjustments here or there. And had the creators stayed on, that would have probably been fine, as there have been many successful cut and paste adaptations before. Namely, both of Michael Haneke's Funny Games, both the original Austrian movie and the English adaptation, are cut and dry perfect copies tailored to fit so that it was more accessible for people as possible. And I say more accessible because I know Hollywood's idea is that more audiences will be gained from live action instead of animation, which I think wholly disregards animation as a valid and better, in some cases, art form. But I'll talk more about that later. From there, I know that most people on Twitter that are blinded by the slime love to have the argument, they have to change things, it's a different medium, it's never going to be the exact same, and haters are going to be mad because it isn't the exact same. And again, that's not wholly the case, as I mentioned before with Netflix's One Piece. It's fine if there are tweaks and differences, sure. But make it good? I don't know, crazy thought. Something that Netflix's Avatar did not do. There were literally 2 things I can point to that I liked that were changed, and that's it. But let's get into some of the objective terrible changes they made to this show that were just generally upsetting without going full aggro about it. I'll just tell you the thing and tell you why it's a bad change. I'm not going to argue about it forever back and forth. Okay, so right off the bat, why can Aang fly? 6 minutes into the first episode, Aang is flying. And no, it is not gliding. He is not wearing a billowing suit to help him glide like Tenzin and his kids in Korra were. So, again, why is he flying? This only makes me think the following. Zahir, the only character who is able to achieve this ability in 4,000 years, mind you, of any airbender, and who, by the way, is a sequel series villain, so after Aang has been long gone, is essentially now pointless. Yay. Continuing on, why does Aang need his glider then? Why doesn't he just fly out of certain dangerous moments, like when Sokka catches him for no reason other than only to serve a bad Hollywood cliche moment? Why does he need Appa at all? I could continue, and I'm sure there are even more questions and thoughts from him being able to fly that me and others watching this slime talked about, but I'm gonna keep going forward with other changes. Going back to just the beginning of the show, in the first 20-ish minutes, why are you showing us any of the Fire Nation's overtaking of the world? And quick side note on top of that, giving us a horrible CGI bastardization of the original's intro.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air. The ruthless leader of the Fire Nation believes this is his moment to launch a merciless campaign to conquer the world. The one person with the ability to master all 4 elements and protect the delicate balance between nations.
And then giving us the original's intro, but through Gran Gran.
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the 4 nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all 4 elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished.
But back to the changes with the intro and it making no sense is why is the genocide of the Southern Air Temple seen and all but basically known by Aang before he runs away? Way to ruin the emotions of that entire moment that in this adaptation happens no less than like 20 minutes later. Later, what the hell has been done with Kyoshi? Why can she suddenly just possess Aang whenever and go sicko mode on Zhao and his garrison? I know both Roku and Kyoshi possess Aang in small minimal points in the original, but this seems as though she can just take over Aang whenever she wants and stop anybody in her way. Which begs the question, why couldn't she have done that 100 years ago when the Fire Nation was murdering everyone at the Air Temple? Why are there even future Avatar incarnations if they can just be possessed by Kyoshi or whomever before whenever they want? How are they not just invincible? Why not build each Avatar shrine everywhere so you can just pick and choose your character?
Choose your character!
And then, why are not only Sozin but Ozai shown so much in this show? Ozai was scarier when he was in the shadows. It's not necessary to see him nor his war planning and home life this much. And that's coming from someone who wanted to see more Ozai. This ruins him. And with that, why is Azula here? In a time to establish lore and characters, the original does well to pace all of that out so that things don't get all muddy and meshed together. Okay, let me breathe. I'm just gonna list off a bunch of other why these changes because for the ones I said before and the ones hereafter, these are changes that are not necessary for an adaptation and these changes actively make this show bad. So, Aang doesn't waterbend once in this show. Again, this is an adaptation of Book 1, Water. Why does Gran Gran have the waterbending scroll in the beginning? Why were Katara and Sokka in the Lover's Tunnel? Why were the Badger Moles made into scary monsters for a bit? Why does Jet want to assassinate Boomy? Why is Boomy awful to Aang for leaving and why does Aang immediately know who Boomy is? Why are we learning about Iroh and Lu Ten so quickly? Why is the whole Spirit of the Forest story reduced to just Ko? Why is Zhao puppeted by Azula? Why doesn't Aang kill Zhao when possessed by the Ocean Spirit? Why did Momo die? He got better at least, but these changes, as I said, not only are wholly unnecessary, but also some of them would have happened naturally during the course of the show if they stuck by the same structure of the original. Those moments don't need to happen now, and making them happen now makes all of the early changes muddled and diluted. But Kim and others making decisions for Netflix's Avatar made the mistake of overpacking things they believed would mend their mistakes via fan service. The idea behind fan servicing and why it is bad is because it's showing a thing you remember without any reason or substance with the intent to elicit a reaction for the audience since it's something you loved before, remember? Star Wars is notorious for this, as in Anakin building C-3PO and the Phantom Menace as a child, Rey for no reason saying her last name is Skywalker in The Rise of Skywalker, Darth Maul's little cameo in Solo through the hologram lighting up his lightsaber, Finn calling himself Rebel Scum in The Last Jedi, and like every time someone in that ruined universe says, I have a bad feeling about this. All of those are empty callbacks with really no substance other than to try and force you to feel some type of way and draw you to what's happening, rather than just telling a good story. Which is exactly what Netflix's Avatar does. Starting with Kyoshi, yes, we all understand that everyone loves Kyoshi. I do too, which is exactly why this crap made me mad. Not only do they kind of turn the whole Kyoshi Island story around by not at all having Aang come to the understanding that the Avatar can be a subject of contention, as it was in Chin Village, with him being put on trial for Kyoshi killing Chin the Great, or really the Conqueror, but also with the Kyoshi we know from the original that is stoic and very direct with Aang, and also ominous and cool.
I killed Chin the Conqueror.
Instead, we got this Kyoshi that just kind of bitches and yells at Aang to accept destiny and be alone.
And how many have already been hurt because you haven't been here? Run away from your responsibilities again, and even more will be hurt. Being the Avatar means putting your duties above all else, even your life.
And then boom, she possesses him and fights and scares Zhao away cause she can do that now? Even though all she does in the original is just confess to killing Chin, no more, no less. Because if she could take over Aang whenever she wanted, she could have just stopped the entire fight. Gotta breathe. But don't worry, instead of focusing on why this is a bad fan service moment, people on Twitter are so happy, at least she's 7 foot tall, so accurate. Next example, there is no reason a present-day Azula should be shown at all in book 1, or even if some, this much. Without even mentioning my acting/direction gripes, it's too much. We don't need to have all of this Ozai and Azula content when we've only just met Zuko. This is literally Kim and the others trying to feed people the characters we like to see, even though we are all perfectly fine waiting to see them when they naturally show up. Like, if it were me and I was being forced to put Azula in book 1, I would have had Azula only be shown during the last episode, during the assault on the Northern Water Tribe, during Zhao's speech to Zuko. Because the Azula we did get,
you're perfect. It's not good enough. The one who will restore balance to the world. There are always ways to get in the game. The Avatar.
And then let's talk about some of the fan servicing in what I think was literally the worst and most disgraceful episode of this slime, episode 4, Into the Dark. There are 2 points in this episode that rubbed me the completely wrong way, so let's just start with one. Listen, to preface, everything about this Iroh was just awful. Literally one of the original's most beloved characters and made into this.
I must leave, but I look forward to many more conversations with you, Avatar. In the meantime, I'll have some jasmine tea sent to you. It's quite soothing.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Sharing tea with a fascinating stranger is one of life's true delights.
No, thank you for what you said. It helped me.
I'm glad.
Not only did they decide to go fully into Iroh's backstory with his son Lu Ten, a character we don't even learn about until the 9th episode of Book 2 in the original, but we also get the very famous Leaves from the Vine from episode 15 of Book 2. Both things are shown way too early, just because, remember? Everyone cried and loved this, yay! No. Not only is this one of the saddest moments in the original when Iroh sings this, but also it served for the show's memorial for the original voice actor, the late great Mako. And with the writing, the unnecessary callbacks, and the yet more muddying of the weaving storyline that were condensed and packaged into the show in the least efficient way possible, this was offensive. This was bad. This was gross. Like, I really can't say much more. Moving on. Last big example of Kim and the others really trying to tug on your memory emotions to bandage the terribleness of this adaptation was the ever so recognizable secret tunnel moment. Now, I call this fan servicing not because this moment was pulled to be put in a time frame that it didn't happen in, but because if Kim didn't want to waste time, I guess there is a world in where I'd understand skipping this moment from the original to save that. But instead, they crammed in a misled version of it while a bad callback to Leaves from the Vine was happening and the Boomy/Aang friendship and storyline were being decimated. But wait, wasn't Aang in the secret tunnel, you might be asking? And I'd respond with yes he was. And this is where in the original, Aang and Katara's feelings begin for one another. And side note, earlier in that OG episode, the two were practicing waterbending together, but that never happens in this season. But the two's feelings were highlighted especially so because they talk about how in those tunnels, they were made for the lovers Oma and Shu. But you know who was there instead? That's right, brother and sister Sokka and Katara. And now I really see how there was talk about them wanting to make the live action more Game of Thrones-esque. All to top that off, the whole thing about Chong, the leader of the Nomads, and their band in the original are supposed to be like bad at music for comedic purposes. But no, we gotta make them sound harmonically good. And then have the acting be awful. And I mean awful.
So what are you doing here? Hear that? Harmony. That's what we're all about. They're doomed.
And while we're on the subject of bad acting, you guys, this show...
You're too late, Avatar.
I knew it. It was you.
Yes. Could have hurt him. That's his fault. I'm doing all right with my forms, but shaping is hard. I'm not the anime.
He is the last airbender.
Katara, it's too late. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
So I can save the waterbenders.
Especially if you're going to go into the dark void from which no living being ever returns.
Which is why we have to kill them all.
He was the strongest person I knew.
So here's the thing, before someone starts yelling about it, yes, I understand that some actors, and I mean some, the others don't have this excuse, are children. But the acting across the board is bad, and usually that is very indicative that even if there is terrible acting happening, the directing must be awful. For if some of these clips were the best the director could get, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. And with that, not just better directing or even acting coaches, but maybe hire some dialect coaches? Why do both Aang and Sokka have Los Angeles mushmouth when they speak?
There's no way you're getting me on. Didn't think so. Okay, back to your duties. Let's settle this between us.
The anime? I'm not the anime. I've seen it. It's dangerous.
Some of these deliveries are unintelligible and muddled. Continuing, why does Iroh sound like a PlayStation 2 NPC whenever he speaks?
Cities are like people. They always have their dark side.
You must have left it somewhere in the house. Do you have any idea where it could be?
You should rest.
No time. They'll send more soldiers soon.
And then he'll kill you. He's too strong.
I'm told that Fire Nation agents in the city have taken to sowing terror to weaken the Earthbenders' resistance.
What the hell is this Boomy?
You dare tell me I should care? You may be 100 years old, but you haven't lived for 100 years.
Why does Aang speak like a cringy melodramatic teenager? The amount of vocal fry from Gordon is crazy, and that he probably was given these directions is crazier.
Back home, the other kids used to say I was lucky because I never really had to train. I like the parts of Omashu that aren't so depressing, but keep them under control. Emotion meets spirit. I didn't know how to reach you. Basic bending forms are mostly just physical movement.
Also, don't sit here and tell me that some of these actors are just kids and acting is hard, because Zach Tyler Eisen, the original voice actor for Aang, was 12 years old at the beginning of Avatar, and his range of emotions is unreal. It's so good. And with that, voice acting is by itself a harder medium to act, since all of the emotion has to be conveyed through your voice. You don't have your body or face to add to it, and the physical acting of the live action while we're at it is rough. With the idea that direction was bad and show running was bad, let's also talk about the show as a whole. The CGI is awful. Now I understand that CGI is sometimes hit or miss, but this is like cringy anime adaptation movies level bad CGI. Plus, if the cast was going to be on this many fully green screen sets that just look awful, why not, you know, just not do it live action then? One comment that kept being thrown out while we were watching the live action was, you know, I feel like this show would actually be really good if it was animated. And with the awful acting and direction, that brings us to just complete character misinterpretations. Avatar has a lot of good to it, but the biggest part is that the characters are fantastic. And with the live action already putting bad ingredients into the soup, of course the way these characters are portrayed are butchered. Katara is like barely there. Nothing really happens with her except that she is there to serve as Aang's waterbending teacher. Next season, I guess, since they don't have time to show any of that in their adaptation of Book 1, Water. Plus, the removal of sexism in the show just makes no sense. It's like Albert Kim and the others who worked on the show saw that the original had sexism and just decided, oh, gotta cut that out, without understanding that the original, being a Nickelodeon cartoon in 2005, showed these themes not to imprint awful ideologies to children, but rather through Katara and Sokka mainly show that sexism is wrong. Most of Katara's story is focused on overcoming society's perception of women and female waterbenders, but no, we don't get that at all until episode 8, kind of, in Netflix's Avatar. And with the terrible acting, it seems like the actors can barely even grit out the misdirected sexism plot that in the live action just feels randomly thrown in, unlike the original, which shows this conflict to be ever present throughout the first season's story. And with Sokka, all of that is gone, so he's just like a guy. That's it. With Boomy, he's supposed to be a character that reminds Aang that he can not only still be a kid, but also he can think outside the box and find another way to solving certain situations. But instead,
let it fall, and you win!
Boomy, this isn't a game!
Yes, it is. One that requires you to make impossible choices.
I've already discussed my thoughts on Iroh, Azula, and Ozai, but for Zuko, we all agreed he was the best part of the show, if that's even saying much. It should be hard to mess up Zuko when he as a character had such a great and well thought out basis for his entire story. But don't worry, the live action still messes him up.
My father, he ran!
The thing Kim seemed to miss is that Zuko for book 1 is supposed to basically be the main antagonist until Zhao oversteps him. Of course, we are supposed to understand that he does have some reasons for why he is hunting the Avatar, but we don't need a sob story or flashback about Zuko being banished by Ozai every 5 seconds. I think the thing about Zuko that makes him a great character is that you really don't like him in book 1 until maybe the Blue Spirit episode or even until book 2. But that's completely missed. And even though I can admit I did like the whole Fleet 41 bit and don't mind that Zuko fought Ozai for a second before resisting, there's a moment in episode 6, which is aka the only passable episode maybe, when Zuko as the Blue Spirit is knocked out. We don't need this long exposition conversation between Zuko and Aang, especially when it's riddled with a dumb relation conversation about which ink brushes either uses, which aren't air nomads supposed to not use any animal products anyway, so why would Aang even... Whatever. Anyways, if Kim doesn't want to waste time, why didn't they just do what they did in the original? Zuko gets knocked out, and Aang is there when he wakes up and says,
Before the war started, I used to always visit my friend Kuzan. He was one of the best friends I ever had. And he was from the Fire Nation, just like you. If we knew each other back then, do you think we could have been friends too?
That's great, and shows more depth to both characters, which is also part of how I think this show just treats the entire audience like they're dumb, and also the writing is just dumb. I don't know. But let's move on to the worst sin of this show, Aang. To literally not even have the character that the show is to be centered around right, I just don't get it. Why is Aang not allowed to be a kid? He is nothing but sad and angry and gloomy the entire show, except for the weird buck-up moments that I'll get into more later when I address tone and music. And yes, the acting, the mushmouth, the bad CGI, it just isn't Aang. Everything he does in the live action just feels like it's the conveyor belt plot that has to move him along. I'll say more on this in a second, but it all feels unearned and forced. It feels as though the only reason this Aang is going through this story is because that Aang went through his story, wherein for that Aang, all of the beauty of how the original went, it made sense for him, it felt earned, it felt natural. But in the live action for this Aang, it was overly complicated, constantly deterred, and just poorly written. Aang's story is that he wants to be a kid and not the Avatar, but instead of seeing that feeling of wanting to be a kid in the live action, we just have this ultra serious Aang that all along his journey is just shovel-fed the seriousness of being this ultimate warrior, a concept completely new to this live action version. I don't know how else to explain this really, because the best way I can put it is that this is a soulless Aang. In fact, I'd say all of the characters in the live action are soulless. Not necessarily the actors' faults, who's to say, but these characters are not the same as these characters. And not to steal from Mr. Plinkett, but really try and use the Mr. Plinkett test for the live action version of these characters.
Describe the following Star Wars character without saying what they looked like, what kind of costume they wore, or what their profession or role in the movie was. Describe this character to your friends like they ain't never seen Star Wars.
And I'll emphasize, do this for only the live action versions and what they do in the Netflix show. Don't use any prior knowledge of the characters from the cartoon to do this. And for example, we did it with Sokka, and in the live action, all we got was, he kissed 2 girls, I guess? When it comes to music, it's pretty simple to explain why it's bad. It's bad because following all of the bad parts I explained earlier, the music will change to try and invoke a forced feeling that is unearned in that moment. The best example is Katara. She never waterbends or fights people, and then suddenly 5 episodes in, this. The change of music is very quick, but still, it feels as though they're trying to make up for any bad storytelling by tacking on fanfare music that should invoke a feeling of success so that they can band-aid all the slime that was on the screen. And this happens a lot in the show for a bunch of different moments where they're trying to get you to feel sad, angry, happy, or concerned quickly. And not only that, but I believe if there was consistency at all between music, acting, story, etc., maybe this would have worked. And that brings me to tone. Maybe if there was more jovial, lackadaisical kind of music played in the moments where they were trying to be comical, maybe it would have come off that way. Maybe if there were actual fleshing out of these characters and their stories as they had been done in the original, and not this poorly envisioned abridging and misdirection of whatever this slime turned out to be, maybe this could have worked. But combined with all of that has been stated thus far, and then the juxtaposition of the live action trying to be the next Game of Thrones, but then suddenly trying to throw a joke out there that was from the original, even though serious music was being played behind it, it obviously didn't work. This no direction for tone, I think, was the final nail in the coffin that slated that Slimeflix's Slimevatar would never be a good adaptation. So, all in all, no, I don't think Netflix's Avatar is good, and really it feels sort of like a slap in the face. It feels as though Kim and anyone else behind this felt that they could just poorly make this adaptation as a misguided and hacked up version of the original, because they were not only banking on the built-in audience, but banking that both that audience and new audiences will excuse how poorly this show was made, because they want Avatar content. Which, listen, I get it. We all want more Avatar content. Of course we do. But maybe it's the Sonic fan in me, but if we all agreed this slime was awful, maybe they'd listen, or at least stop, because this doesn't deserve a second season or more. Not unless they redid the first, and you and I both know they'd never do that. I mean, to get it completely wrong, I just don't understand. And I could go into even more detail if I really wanted to, like for example, instead of showing bending as martial arts as they do in the original, they make it slopless magic in the live action, showing that all of those behind the Netflix version just fully misunderstood the original and its greatness. And it truly wouldn't have been impossible to make a good adaptation, but this was just not it. Alrighty, well, I think I've finally tired myself out and can now stop thinking about this bad adaptation, of which I probably need to do a full rewatch of the original and Korra to cleanse my palate. And hey, in good news, at least we know DiMartino and Konietzko are working on the Team Avatar as adults movie, and they've confirmed a third series for Avatar following the Avatar after Korra. So, listen, there is good Avatar content on the horizon that we can actually have faith in. We just gotta wait, and hopefully no more of this crap. But other than that, I want to thank everybody for sitting through and hearing me yell, but please subscribe, like, share this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!